Chapter 1585. King of Hell Chu, who had made a desperate counterattack and won a great victory, was confused. He didn't know about his victory, let alone what benefits he had gained from this game. The only thing he felt now was pain. There was really only pain. The unbearable pain that the heavenly demon had inflicted on him before had not really disappeared. He had just forcefully endured it before. Now that the heavenly demon had retreated, the pressure was not so great. His stubborn heart naturally disappeared, and the pain returned. Or rather, it was not correct to say that it had returned. He was just forcefully enduring it before. Now that the pillar was gone, he could no longer suppress it. Also, his sea of consciousness was unprecedentedly swollen. The energy in his sea of consciousness had been methodically following a certain pattern. Perhaps it was the attack method that he had just learned from the heavenly demon. It was automatically organizing and rearranging itself. It was surging and attacking endlessly. The brothers surrounded Chu Yang with concern. They looked at Chu Yang, who was in a state of confusion and pain. Everyone was extremely anxious, but they all knew that they must not disturb him now. Moreover, the heavenly demon had been defeated by Chu Yang and had fled in defeat. Although they were worried, they were also slightly relieved. After all, the heavenly demon had retreated in a crushing defeat just now. Chu Yang had defeated the strong with the weak probably because he had used some kind of mysterious forbidden technique. Now that he was suffering from the backlash of his own forbidden technique, the consequences might not be small. That was why he was in so much pain. But as long as he was still alive, even if there were consequences, it didn't matter. There was no need to be afraid of consequences with heavy pills. The Tribulation Sword Master had always been a special existence that created miracles, especially Chu Yang. But no one would have thought that if a demon wanted to devour a person could also devour a demon. Chu Yang was in great pain at this moment. But in fact, he had gained a lot of benefits. Seeing her lover suffering, Mo Qingwu's eyes were filled with tears. She anxiously circled around Chu Yang. But she also knew that Chu Yang was now at a critical moment in the battle between heaven and man. She didn't dare to make a sound at all. She held back her tears until her little face turned red. She felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She covered her little mouth and didn't dare to let herself cry. Because the game between Chu Yang and the heavenly demon was carried out in the land of black fog. And the place where they fought later on was even the place of their thoughts. The outside world had no idea what had happened between them. The heavenly demon had retreated too quickly and too suddenly. Although everyone vaguely saw that he seemed to have carried someone away, no one took it to heart. Everyone was here. As for whether or not the heavenly demon took the others away, it didn't mean much to them. No one would have thought that the person carried away by the heavenly demon was actually the Dharma Supreme. It was truly unexpected that the Dharma Supreme's strength was so strong that he could almost be ranked among the top 3 in the world. To the crowd, his strength and the degree of danger he posed might even be above that of the heavenly demon eccentric. Moreover, if these two great demons were to join forces, Chu Yang and the rest would definitely not be a match for them, even if they worked together. After a long while, Chu Yang suddenly roared, "Open!" King of Hell Chu suddenly opened his tightly closed eyes. It was unknown what he had opened, but Chu Yang suddenly opened his tightly closed eyes. 2 beams of divine light shot out from his eyes. When the concerned eyes of the brothers suddenly met with these 2 beams of light, they almost subconsciously shifted their gazes away. Everyone felt an unprecedented heavy pressure. That was a kind of majesty of the spirit. This indescribable yet real sense of pressure was something that none of them had ever felt before. Even if they were facing a supreme martial artist, the Chu Yang in front of them seemed to have undergone some miraculous changes. However, upon closer inspection, his cultivation was still the same as before. There was no improvement at all. In fact, due to the game just now, there was a considerable degree of depletion. They couldn't help but be curious. Where did this pressure come from? The next moment, Chu Yang seemed to have completely returned to normal. He panted a few times, and his face suddenly turned red. Then, soybean-sized beads of sweat appeared on his forehead and body. In an instant, his whole body was drenched in sweat. This was the aftereffect of overexerting his mental strength. In the battle of consciousness just now, both sides had exhausted a lot of their mental strength, especially Chu Yang. He had never experienced such a battle in the sea of consciousness. When he was in intense pain earlier, he only cared about the pain. Now that the pain had passed, the symptoms of the depletion of mental strength naturally followed. In addition, there was also a heartfelt palpitation. Don't look at Chu Yang's determination to never succumb to the heavenly demon's might. He was still afraid. Everyone would be afraid of the threat of death. Chu Yang was no exception. Now that the crisis had passed, the feeling of lingering fear emerged. However, in addition to the lingering fear, there was also endless joy. He had guarded the door of his heart as a human. He had broken through the temptation of lust and defeated the threat of death. He had broken free from the devil's claws. After this, he would no longer be afraid of the heart demon. He would never succumb to anyone or anything again. Chu Yang's mind was in a trance. After a while he said tiredly, "So powerful. I almost lost. If I lost, it's all over. Even if my soul doesn't scatter, I'll become a complete walking corpse." The brothers were speechless. After all, they didn't understand what Chu Yang had encountered. Seeing Chu Yang like this, GMO rolled his eyes and said first, "Boss, you're talking about just now?" Chu Yang grunted. He turned his head and looked around. He said, "Where's the heavenly demon?" Everyone looked at each other. Luo Kadi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Big brother, as early as an hour ago, the heavenly demon had already suffered a great defeat. He fled for his life, screaming that he had seen ghosts all the way. That speed, we can't catch up to him. We can't catch up to him at all. Chu Yang was startled. An hour ago? It was actually an hour ago. In his consciousness, all the way until he opened his eyes just now, he was still fighting. How could there be no enemy advancing an hour ago? What was going on? Wasn't this a little too strange? Could it be that boss didn't know that the heavenly demon had already been defeated and fled? Xie Danxiong asked with an incredulous expression. Chu Yang smiled bitterly and just shook his head. Mo Qingwu jumped up and hugged Chu Yang. Now she could finally cry out loud, but she realized that she actually didn't want to cry at all. Her heart was only filled with joy. It was as if she had thousands of words to tell Chu Yang, but when they reached her mouth, all she could say was, "That's great, that's great." That was all. However, Chu Yang was touched. He knew that when Mo Qingwu said, "That's great," it was definitely not "That's great that the heavenly demon was defeated," but that "You're fine, that's great. The strong enemy is gone. It seems like we should get down to business, right?" Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang thoughtfully, and then changed the topic. "Yes." Duke Yu's spirits were lifted. He said, "That guy who was in the way has scrammed. I'll bring you to the entrance of the City of Fairies to get down to business." With Chu Yang's great victory, everyone was in a good mood. Laughing and laughing, they clustered around Duke Yu and left. All the haze from before had completely disappeared. Only Mo Tianji, Mo Qingwu, and Chu Yang walked at the back. "Just now, it seems like you took advantage of him, right?" Mo Tianji chuckled and asked in a low voice. "Yes, the situation just now was inexplicable. I think maybe I swallowed some of his soul. It should be like this." Chu Yang restrained his mind, and once again immersed himself in his sea of consciousness. This time, he unexpectedly discovered that his sea of consciousness had almost doubled in size. He was also startled by this sudden change. Therefore, he didn't conceal anything from Mo Tianji's question. Cough cough. Mo Tianji choked and coughed. Chapter 1586. The old man's heart skipped a beat. Sneeze. With the master's cultivation level, he can actually sneeze? Oh! Shui Leihan smiled bitterly. He sped up and suddenly said, "When that person comes up, arrange for someone to bring him to the East Pole." "Yes." The old man hurriedly agreed. Then he asked, "Do we bring him directly to the Emperor Dong's palace?" Shui Leihan said, "Before he grows up, don't let him know what the Emperor Dong's palace means." "Yes, I understand." Shui Leihan flicked his sleeves and suddenly disappeared. There was only a low sigh that sounded a little dejected. "Ah, I forgot that he still has someone. In the end, it's really troublesome." He disappeared completely. The old man was flabbergasted as he looked at the unforeseen event before him. And he hesitated for a long time, before he finally shook his head and left. He sighed as he walked, and he felt that all the rare things he'd encountered in his life couldn't compare to the indescribably shocking scene he'd witnessed in the lower dimensions. So Lord didn't want to bring him to the East Pole at first, but now he changed his mind. Could it be that he wants to take care of this guy personally? Prime Minister Xuanyi Lu muttered in his heart. Who exactly is this little guy? At the side, countless people who saw the old man all bowed to him respectfully from afar. But the old man didn't seem to notice this. He was still mumbling along the way and disappeared with a confused look on his face. Since then, a rumor suddenly spread in the East Pole of the Heaven Imperial Court. Could it be that Lord didn't like the Prime Minister and scolded him severely? He actually scared a super expert, whose name shook the entire Heaven Imperial Court. It seemed that the conflict wasn't light at all. Thus, the rumor of the East Pole's discord between the ruler and his minister quietly spread and had a far-reaching impact. The 12 of them came to the depths of the forest together. As the master, Duke Yu was naturally familiar with the place. He first came to a place that looked extremely desolate. This place was indeed much more desolate than other places. There was not a single blade of grass within 100 feet of it, and the ground was covered with a thick layer of snow. Duke Yu's eyes revealed a trace of unconcealable sadness. He waved his hand. The snow on the ground floated away with a whoosh, revealing the smooth ground. This place originally looked like the mouth of a spring, but now it had dried up for God knows how many years. Maybe 100 years, maybe 1,000 years. It might even be 10,000 years, or 100,000 years. This is the entrance to the City of Elves. Originally, this place was a heavenly spirit spring. Drinking the spring water from this place could prolong life and cure all diseases. And the reason why this heaven spirit spring was able to form, it's because of the mist from the spring of life in the City of Elves. Duke Yu's voice was somewhat sorrowful. After the City of Elves disappeared, the heaven spirit spring barely lasted for 3 years, before it gradually dried up, and finally became what it is now. The once prosperous elf clan has been annihilated in the dust of time. Just like this dried-up spring, it's hard to find any signs of life. Duke Yu looked up at the sky and sighed. Then what should we do now to reopen the City of Elves? Chu Yang asked. As long as the spring of life is irrigated from here, the spring of life will naturally sink all the way until it reaches the bottom of the earth. It will enter the mouth of the original spring of life and ferment the vitality within, which will then nourish the elven tree of life next to it. When the tree of life recovers, it will definitely cause a change in the weather and cause the celestial crystals and moonlight to shine here. Then the 3 aspects will continue to circulate and gradually advance. This way, the City of Elves can recover its vitality and slowly become stronger. Duke Yu said, when the inside can withstand a certain amount of pressure, we can go in. He finished speaking. Sighing, he said, however, this process requires a considerable amount of spring water from the spring of life. You and I both know that the spring of life is the most precious treasure in the world. If you find that the amount of spring of life is insufficient, then don't waste it. Then don't waste it. I totally understand. I completely understand. Chu Yang nodded. He naturally understood Duke Yu's intentions. However, the spring of life in the tribulation space had already reached the level of perfection, and had even far exceeded the quality of the spring of elves that the elf clan needed. Moreover, it could continue to grow and multiply endlessly. Even if there was a great loss, it could bear it. There was no need to worry about Duke Yu's concerns. Aren't your requirements too low? Could it be that you only want the City of Elves to be able to withstand a certain amount of pressure, and you will be satisfied? Chu Yang asked. Don't you want the City of Elves to see the light of day again? Aren't you too pessimistic? Duke Yu laughed bitterly. Of course I want the City of Elves to see the light of day again. In fact, I am the only elf left in this world. My strength is very limited. If the City of Elves reappears in the world, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. Experts from all over the world will hear the news and come in droves. How can I protect it by myself? I still understand the logic of a man's wealth being his own ruin. Let it continue to sleep underground. As long as I can protect it from being destroyed in my lifetime, it will be enough. Emotianji nodded and said, "Yes, Brother Dukyu is indeed unable to protect the city of elves by himself. If you force it to appear without considering the consequences, I'm afraid it will have the opposite effect, and instead accelerate the destruction of the city of elves." That's true. Chu Yang pondered for a moment and agreed. Under Emotianji's command, the 10 people immediately spread out and surrounded an area of 1,000 feet, strictly guarding it. The remaining Dukyu and Chu Yang stood in the center position. "Shall we begin?" Chu Yang asked. Dukyu's face suddenly turned pale, and his body actually trembled a little. He had waited for tens of thousands of years, and today, the Laduo was about to become a reality. This kind of excitement was hard for anyone to avoid. He slowly closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Please begin." The corners of his cheeks were clearly protruding. Those were the marks of gritting his teeth after making a decision. From this, it could be seen that Dukyu's heart was in a perilous situation and definitely would not be as calm as he looked on the surface. After saying "please begin," Dukyu unexpectedly fell into a short period of silence. Chu Yang understood Dukyu's current feelings very well. He remained silent and waited patiently. Finally, Dukyu slowly opened his hands, and circles of green ripples rippled out from his body. One circle after another landed on the ground that had already dried up to the point that it was beyond recognition. In the surroundings, countless flowers, plants and trees began to grow abnormally rapidly. Countless big trees that could not be encircled by 5 people were growing at an astonishing speed visible to the naked eye. They grew upwards, and the trunks of the trees were also rapidly thickening. As for the small trees in the surroundings, their growth was even more obvious. They were just small trees a moment ago. In the next moment, they had become huge trees that could only be encircled by one person. In the next moment, they had transformed into huge trees that could only be encircled by several hands. Gu Duxing and the others who were originally guarding the periphery were surprised to find that all the trees in the outermost circle were growing crazily. They were slowly compressing the original space, and gradually, they were all connected together. The 10 people were all pushed out. Moreover, the trend was still expanding. Although the extent was not that big, it was still continuing to expand. There were already many towering trees in front of them. As far as the eye could see, there was only one tree left, a huge tree with a diameter of at least 1,000 feet. All the trees seemed to have merged into one. However, the giant tree was still growing and expanding outwards. "This is really amazing." Emo Ching Wu blinked her big bright eyes and took in deep breaths. "Indeed. Perhaps this is the true secret technique of the elf race?" Emotanji muttered thoughtfully. "Oh no, this is bad, this is bad." Emo Ching Wu suddenly realized. Chu Yang is still inside. He can't have been grown into the heart of the tree like this, right? Haha. Everyone laughed. How is this possible? Don't worry, little girl. Your brother Chu Yang will definitely not grow into the heart of the tree. Inside, the trees were still growing at an accelerated speed. As all the trees grew crazily, the space was further compressed. Slowly, a circular space with a radius of 15 feet was formed. It went straight to the blue sky. However, the growth of the branches was also abnormally dense. The top had long been connected, but not a bit of the sky could be seen. There was only a strong smell of life in the surroundings, which made people feel relaxed and happy. Other than the trees, the flowers and plants grew even faster. It was even abnormally terrifying. Around the withered land, all the flowers and plants were growing at an abnormally terrifying speed. They were growing towards the center, where the dried-up spring was located. However, as soon as they came into contact with this withered land, all the plants would instantly wither. It was as if there was an indescribable evil there that specialized in devouring the vitality of all the plants. However, Dukyu was not discouraged at all. He continued to work hard, constantly urging his own special ability. Green rings of light appeared on his body, one after another, and continued to expand. The flowers and plants continued to grow and wither, but the momentum of their advancement was also constantly increasing. It was just that the rate of advancement was really too slow. It was almost moving forward inch by inch. Sometimes there would even be slight reversals. Due to the continuous urging of his special ability, Dukyu's forehead was constantly sweating. His face was also gradually becoming pale. It was obvious that he was now close to overdraft. However, he still persisted. He used all his effort, mental strength, and willpower to persevere. That was the last duo that had persisted for an entire clan for 100,000 years. Chu Yang silently stepped forward and raised his hand. Dukyu timely opened his mouth, and an incomplete heavy pill was flicked into Dukyu's mouth. The pill immediately melted in his mouth. It instantly replenished all the energy that Dukyu had consumed. Dukyu's spirit suddenly shook. His two hands once again drew countless mysterious circles that were filled with profound mysteries. Circles of green light came out, and the frequency of his input was even higher than before. The spring of life is of great significance to you guys in the future. I know. Chu Yang grunted and took 2 steps forward. He came to the top of the teacup-sized entrance. Then he stretched out his hand and squatted down in a horse stance. Stop. You better stop right there. Dukyu's face was filled with black lines, and he angrily said, This is the spring of life. Please don't make such a smelly posture. It's as if you want to go to the toilet. Chu Yang, who was squatting in a horse stance, was stunned. Then he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Big brother, you have to know that I can only use this posture to continuously transfer the spring of life from inside, and then let it flow down through my fingers. Other than that, I can only take it out bit by bit. There will definitely be a break in between. Only I can maintain this posture to ensure that the spring of life is endless. Can you not make blind guesses? Dukyu was stunned and said, What blind guesses? You don't even know what you're doing now. Forget it. Just maintain this posture and don't move. After saying that, he quickly turned around and raised his hand to dig out a big piece of the big tree behind him. Then, he adjusted it according to Chu Yang's current posture. Then he used his hand to make a wooden block and stuffed it under Chu Yang's buttocks. He said with a black face, Will it affect you if you sit in this posture? All right. Chu Yang was speechless. What was this? Just now he was still in a horse stance. What about now? Wasn't it more like sitting in that position? Dukyu anxiously waited in anticipation. Then, he saw Minister Chu let out a hey sound again. His finger pointed out with a schwa sound. His fingertip stopped 3 inches above this teacup-sized piece of land. Then, a stream of clear spring water gushed out from his fingertip and poured into this opening. Then it disappeared without a trace. As the clear spring water flowed out continuously, the moment it left Chu Yang's fingertip, each drop of water emitted a bright and colorful light. It was like the Milky Way flowing in the night sky. It brought with it a boundless and dreamy grandeur, as it disappeared into the entrance of the spring of life. Time passed by bit. Chu Yang continued to pour out the spring of life. His expression was calm. Dukyu's face was filled with longing and apprehension. He didn't even blink as he watched the spring of life slowly pour into the entrance. At this moment, Dukyu hoped that Chu Yang could continue to pour out the spring of life continuously until the spring of elves had truly awakened. However, he was also afraid that Chu Yang would use up too much of the spring of life and plant a negative factor in the future. In the tribulation space, compared to Chu Yang's calmness, a certain sword spirit's face was filled with pain. He said, When the ancient tree of life regains its vitality, it can work together with the spring of life to trigger the illumination of the celestial crystal and form a virtuous cycle. From then on, it'll be able to continue growing. When that time comes, we can go down. Chu Yang frowned. How long do you think it'll take until that time? Dukyu frowned uncertainly and said, I'm not very sure about this either, but it should be half a month at the latest, right? After all, the spring of life is the most important part. As long as the spring of life forms, it's equivalent to having the most stable foundation, and the foundation with life will only become more and more stable. So it won't take much time. I believe 15 days is already the limit. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief and said, That's good, 15 days isn't very long. If you had said 15 years or something, I would have hung myself here immediately. That's too much of a waste of time. Dukyu panted and rolled his eyes. He really didn't know what to say to this guy, so he could only keep quiet. He was very worried that if he continued to talk to him, he would be angered to death before his wish for the city of elves was fulfilled. Since he had nothing to do now, of course he had to inform his brothers, especially Mo Qinggu. This girl was very worried about him now, so he didn't want her to cry anymore. Taking advantage of the free time, Chu Yang sent a telepathic message out and told Mo Tianji and the others about the situation inside. I'm inside, everything is fine. It will take about 20 days or so to restore the city of elves. You guys wait patiently outside. Everything will be fine outside. Then he added, you guys are naturally not afraid of hunger, but don't let Qinggu starve. If she loses even a little bit of weight from hunger, I'll make each of you 3 to 5 times fatter when I get out. Chapter 1589. The moment Chu Yang said that, Mo Qinggu blushed and lowered her head sweetly. Mo Tianji was also greatly comforted and said, this guy still has some conscience. He actually knows how to take care of my sister. Don't worry, I'm here. I won't let Qinggu lose weight no matter what. However, while the other brothers outside were relieved, they were also ridiculing him. Fuck. Boss really values women over friends. What do you mean we're not afraid of hunger? Humans are made of iron and steel. If we don't eat, we'll go hungry. Men are also humans, Luo Kadi said sarcastically. How can we not be afraid of hunger? Yes, yes. GMO nodded repeatedly. Valuing women over friends. Second Master Ji is made of flesh and blood. If he doesn't eat for 20 days, he'll die. Only Ao Xieyun and Rui Butong, who are not of our race, would eat raw meat. Second Master Ji would never do such a disgusting thing. Even if you beat me to death, I won't do it. Ao Xieyun and Rui Butong immediately glared at him, as if ready to teach him a lesson at any moment. GMO clearly didn't see the situation in front of him clearly. He continued to provoke them recklessly. What are you looking at? Why don't the two of you go and hunt? What if you starve our future sister-in-law? Don't you have any eyesight? Oh right, remember to hunt more. You can eat raw meat. Second Master Gu and Trickster Mo will roast it. We're not people who don't care about raw meat. Before he finished speaking, Ao Xieyun and Rui Butong had already joined forces and pounced over fiercely. They punched and kicked without mercy. Just by looking at their stance, it was quite possible that they had an irreconcilable feud with GMO. What's the point of hunting? We'll roast the two of you and have enough to eat. GMO shouted angrily. Brothers, attack! Damn it! These two non-humans actually dare to hit Second Master Ji of the human race. Aren't they afraid of provoking anger? Before he finished speaking, the brothers indeed attacked together. However, their targets were Second Master Ji and Second Master Luo, who were being beaten up. Of course, we'll pick the weak ones. We can't afford to offend the brothers from the Dragon and Phoenix races. Only Second Master Ji and Second Master Luo of the human race are ready-made punching bags. It's a waste not to hit them. Bang bang bang. Bang bang bang. Second Master Ji and Second Master Luo tactfully begged for forgiveness at once. They covered their heads and hugged their crotches. Sirs, this lowly one knows his mistake. You are all great men. Please don't overstep your bounds. The Prime Minister can row a boat alone. Please spare my life. Continue. Beat him up. I will take responsibility if he dies. Mo Tianji ordered with a murderous look on his face. Finally, in the blink of an eye, Second Master Ji and Second Master Luo had turned into two dead dogs lying on the ground, gasping for air. Their vision went dark. Gu Duxing moved closer to them with a cold expression. What were you shouting for just now? Second Brother Gu? I didn't hear you clearly. Say it again? Let me hear you clearly. Hurry up. GMO was tongue-tied. So this was the problem. Mo Tianji stepped forward and laughed sinisterly. You, what did you just call me? Was it fraud, Mo? I didn't get to the bottom of it either. Can you repeat that? Hurry up. GMO screamed. If the heavens perish, then so be I. Resigned to his fate, he closed his eyes and stuck out his butt. Go ahead. Don't you guys just want to beat me up? Just don't hit my face. Bang bang. Time passed really quickly. In the blink of an eye, half a month had slipped away just like that. During this half a month, the brothers outside were bored to death. Other than practicing martial arts, they were fighting. GMO and Luo Kadi were beaten up at least 40 to 50 times each. And this was the most conservative estimate. Their mouths were still as cheap as ever. And they were really invincible in flirting with words. Ao Xian and Rui Butong were immensely proud of themselves. Especially Rui Butong, who thought that he was the best among them, acting as if he was the boss, and he was the second in command. Finally, he incurred the wrath of the crowd, and was jointly attacked once. Ao Xian was beaten until his eyes rolled back, and he couldn't breathe for a long time. Rui Butong was almost beaten to the point of nirvana again in the end. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang issued a challenge. The two of them challenged the rest of the people. However, under the command of the Master of Calculation and Manipulation, Mo Tianji, the joint force of the saber supremacy and the sword supremacy was instantly disintegrated. The two of them were naturally beaten up. On the last day, there was originally no reason to stir up trouble. However, the brothers were brooding over the fact that everyone was beaten up except for Mo Tianji. Why was he an exception? What's so great about being a swindler? Thus, without any reason, they also beat up Mo Tianji. When the time came, no one could be spared from becoming a pig's head. Half a month had passed. Everyone's cultivation had improved a lot, and their ability to withstand beatings had also increased significantly. Except for the two women, Mo Qinggu and Mo Layer, everyone else's face was bruised and swollen. It was normal for them to have a pig's head. Usually, any one of these brothers would be handsome men no matter where they went. However, at this moment, everyone's eyes were as black as pandas, their cheeks were as swollen as steamed buns, the corners of their mouths were as swollen as pigs, and the bridge of their noses was so bruised that it was frightening. They were completely like a group of refugees after a war. Mo Qinggu and Mo Layer were already used to such a scene. The two women whispered to each other at the side, chuckling from time to time. His body was weak all over, and his spirit was exhausted. Even lifting a finger was difficult. But where did this unprecedented feeling of strength come from? What's going on? The Dharma Supreme asked instinctively. However, he had already regained his composure in an instant. He raised his head and looked at the black fog right in front of him. Inside the black room was the heavenly demon. This was something that the Dharma Supreme didn't need to identify. It's just a small accident. I'm injured. The heavenly demon sighed. Although his voice was calm, the Dharma Supreme could clearly hear that there was a kind of hysterical rage and violence in his voice that he was trying to suppress. Behind all these negative emotions, there was also a hint of cowardice and panic. Your Excellency seems to be very weak now. The Dharma Supreme narrowed his eyes and asked indifferently. Nonsense, I'm injured. How can I not be weak? The heavenly demon said without thinking, but he didn't hide anything. He didn't need to hide anything from the Dharma Supreme. And there was also no need to hide anything. Because in his heart, the Dharma Supreme was created by himself. He was definitely a direct descendant. But he didn't know that this honesty depended on who he was facing, and what kind of terrible consequences would be caused by his honesty now. Oh! The Dharma Supreme closed his eyes, his expression calm and unruffled. No one knew what he was thinking. Your heavenly demon origin has now truly awakened, and has started to form demonic aura in the true sense. The heavenly demon said, From now on, as long as you cultivate diligently under my guidance, you will definitely become a powerful heavenly demon. Even if you are not as good as me, you will still be within reach of others. The Dharma Supreme laughed dryly. A powerful heavenly demon? He suddenly felt an indescribable sense of absurdity. He was the most powerful person in the heavenly continent, and now he actually had to fight to become a powerful heavenly demon. Work hard. What he pursued was only strong personal strength, but he had never cared about the identity of a heavenly demon. And I can only do it under your guidance? Who do you think you are? Inferior to you? Pooh. Since my heavenly demon origin has already awakened, why do I feel so weak now? This doesn't make sense, right? Shouldn't I feel refreshed and my cultivation has improved greatly? The Dharma Supreme frowned. It should have been like this, but I extracted a part of your cultivation to heal myself. The heavenly demon said matter-of-factly. Life force is transformed. Spring of life is formed. Tree of Life is born. Moonlight is abundant. The passage to the elves has been opened. It's about time. We can all go in now. Hearing this, Chu Yang's spirit shook. In fact, Duke Yu had been waiting impatiently for a long time. In these few days, he had been looking at this spring water without blinking. He was afraid that something unexpected would happen. Now that the passage had finally been opened, he naturally could not wait to call everyone in. Both of his hands were constantly making all kinds of mysterious hand signs in front of his chest. Circles of green light suddenly appeared and poured into the void above the spring water. Slowly, the shape of this void began to undergo some subtle changes. After a burst of distorted mist, a narrow passage that only one person could enter appeared out of thin air. This is really amazing. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. It seemed that Duke Yu did not spend much effort. The passage was open just like that. So simple. Stop talking nonsense. Let's go quickly, Duke Yu hurriedly said. Then, he flew up and entered the passage impatiently. Seeing this, Chu Yang did not dare to delay. He followed closely behind and entered. This is the special ability of our elven race. You see, it seems to be effortless. In fact, it really is effortless. Duke Yu was very excited. It was obvious that he was trying to find something to say. His intention was naturally to hide the ecstasy and excitement that almost made his heart explode. I see. Chu Yang's voice sounded very dull in the passage. He said very gloomily. After the two of them entered, the passage that had suddenly appeared outside gradually disappeared. After a burst of distortion, it completely disappeared. The spring on the ground was also cleverly covered by a few stones. It was as if there were no traces of it at all. All of the refreshing vitality was also slowly scattering everywhere. It made this place look inconspicuous. After entering the passage, Chu Yang felt as if his body was falling endlessly. It was as if he would never fall to the bottom. An unprecedented feeling of weightlessness appeared clearly in his senses. It was like a nightmare. He only felt that his body was falling endlessly. Furthermore, we may not meet again. Let me raise the quality of your spring of life by 1 level. The entire spring of life trembled violently and suddenly bubbled. The ancient tree of life beside the spring of life also trembled. The tree rustled and sprouted violently. Many places that had decayed long ago were recovering at an astonishing speed visible to the naked eye. The crown of the tree shook continuously, and in the blink of an eye, it grew more than 3 times its original size. The little tree of life beside it also experienced changes. Compared to the ancient tree of life, the growth of the little tree of life was even more obvious and exaggerated. In just a breath's time, it had grown 17 to 18 feet. The originally small crown of the tree had increased at least 20 times its original size. It was almost connected together. The originally slender tree trunk had also become so thick that it would take 2 people to wrap their arms around it. It had grown at least 10 times, or even 100 times. In addition to the drastic changes around the spring of life, even further away, countless little trees of life popped up every 10 feet. In the blink of an eye, this place had become a small forest with a radius of tens of miles. A forest completely made up of trees of life. Chu Yang's sudden and unexpected action could be said to be super generous. It had almost made the number of trees of life reach 1/30th of the elf race's peak. Although the current situation was spectacular, it was still only 1/30th. One must know that the elf race's peak had a population of tens of millions. Although the age of the trees of life now was still very short, and far from being comparable to the ancient tree of life that could give birth to elves in the past, the bubbles that came out of the spring of life had transformed into a transparent milky white color. The quality of the entire spring of life had been raised to the limit by Chu Yang's action. Waves of emotions full of infinite joy came from the countless trees of life and swarmed into Chu Yang's heart lake. This made the initiator feel very happy. With the evolution of the spring of life, the light fragments of the celestial crystal moonlight in the sky also became 3 times denser. The more trees of life there were, the more effective it was in triggering the power of the celestial crystal moonlight. The spiritual fog in the space became denser, and the fragrance assailed the nostrils. If an ordinary person took a whiff, they would probably be able to achieve the effect of prolonging their lifespan. Taking a whiff would not be a problem for them to live a few more years. This was not an exaggeration, of course. This phenomenon was only a temporary phenomenon after the upgrade. The time limit was very short, and it would return to normal very soon. However, it was already extremely rare and precious. In the distance, Yu's body involuntarily trembled violently. With his back facing Chu Yang, his eyes revealed a deep sense of sadness. However, at this moment, he still had to pretend that he was completely unaware. He stepped forward and walked towards the destination he mentioned earlier. However, his footsteps became a lot heavier. His originally carefree heart was suddenly filled with something called friendship. Yu's figure finally disappeared completely. Chu Yang waited for a while longer. After confirming that the spring of life was completely stable, he stopped pouring in the higher level of spring of life. He smiled confidently and officially began his treasure hunt. He went everywhere. However, at this moment, Chu Yang simply didn't know that his sudden impulse had helped Yu a great deal, and also helped the elf race a great deal. For the future of this continent, he had created countless peerless geniuses and countless ascended people. The sprites born from the improved spring of life were powerful and talented. They had reached an unimaginable level. Of course, these were all in the future. Chu Yang plunged into the newly grown dense forest and immersed himself in searching for traces of treasures. After a long while, he discovered gloomily. Originally, this piece of land was bare, and it seemed that it would be convenient to find anything. But now, I've suddenly found a group of people, and they've become densely packed. He had actually created trouble for himself, and it was even a huge trouble. However, it's okay. I have a countermeasure. I have people inside. Sword Spirit, Chu Yang summoned. Here, my old profession, I've come out to search for elixirs. Today, you can search to your heart's content until I find you. Sword Master Chu waved his hand, looking as if he was thinking for the Sword Spirit's sake. The Sword Spirit's materialized body instantly appeared in this special space. Then he exclaimed in surprise, "What is this place? It's really a good place. The density of spiritual energy is almost comparable to the territory of the Heavenly Palace Lord. No, it's even more exaggerated than there. It's just a little worse than the Lord's palace. This is where? Isn't this the city of elves?" Chu Yang smiled. Zhang Xian explained the situation to him. The city of elves was undoubtedly a sacred place for cultivation. The density of spiritual energy was also extremely high. However, it wasn't as exaggerated as what the Sword Spirit had described. The reason why it was so exaggerated now was probably because the spring of life's essence couldn't last for a long time. Otherwise, Chu Yang and the rest could just stay here and cultivate. Why would they bother to go up to the Heavenly Palace Lord? After the Sword Spirit understood the whole story, his spirit was shaken. But he didn't hesitate, and his body once again turned into an illusory state. After all, only 2 living people had entered this place. Chapter 1593. There used to be an old ginseng here. Although the plant has already withered, its essence is still here. In the dense forest, the Sword Spirit pointed to a place under his feet. A ginseng that can leave its essence must be at least 10,000 years old. Moreover, this is not an ordinary ginseng. You dig and see. Pay attention to use your elemental energy to confine this area. Once you dig it out, immediately put it into the space and scatter it in the medicine field. If you lose even a little bit of its essence, you won't be able to find it even if you cry. Chu Yang sweated profusely and began to do the hard work. He had only dug down 3 feet when he clearly felt a burst of warmth. He couldn't help but slightly frown. He continued to dig down. Suddenly, a milky white shadow rushed out from the ground with a whoosh sound and flew out like lightning. That flying white shadow hit the elemental energy confinement circle that Chu Yang had set up and fell to the ground with a bang. Chu Yang looked at it and saw that it was a small mass of milky white chaotic energy. Although it was very small, it was full of the purest life energy. He waved his hand and caught it in his hand. He looked at it over and over again. "This is the essence of ginseng?" The Sword Spirit nodded. "And it's the essence of ginseng that already has a little bit of consciousness. It's gathered and not scattered. It's really a good thing. Why are you standing there like a fool? Are you intoxicated? Hurry up and send it to the medicine field. Put it in our ginseng land. The elixirs there will immediately snatch this massive energy. The quality will also be greatly improved. Chu Yang, who was full of black lines, didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly sent it in. Sure enough, the jade snow spirit ginseng and the other ginseng inside. No matter what kind of ginseng it was, upon sensing this extremely pure energy, their branches instantly swayed, revealing an extremely urgent feeling. As soon as they sprinkled down, all kinds of life forces suddenly erupted, each grabbing a little bit, and fiercely pulling it towards their own side. This situation was like a tug-of-war. Moreover, it was as if they were drinking milk and drinking milk. Chu Yang's eyebrows twitched when he saw the fierce fighting. This seemed a bit too humane, right? Could it be more exaggerated? Energy would energy. There's a blood-purple Ganoderma over there. It's at least 50,000 years old. There's the essence of fleeceflower below. It's at least 10,000 years old. There's red core ginseng here. It's the best stuff. You must be very careful when digging. Chu Yang continued to work hard along with the sword spirit's continuous guidance. He collected the top-grade elixirs one after another. He felt as if his soul was singing happily. He didn't feel the least bit tired. The harvest this time seems to be too big. Just as the sword spirit said, I've struck gold. However, Chu Yang also knew the principle of not overdoing it. He would only take one stalk of each kind of elixir. No matter how many there were, he would only take one stalk. If there were very few of them, he would try his best to find their seeds and put them into the elixir field in the tribulation space. As for the main body, he would definitely not touch it. After all, this place was the headquarters of Duke Yu's elf clan. So, there would be many places where they could use these elixirs in the future. What if Chu Yang really searched them thoroughly and hung them up? That's too much. How can we not be nice to them? After walking around for a while, Chu Yang finally discovered that this abandoned city was actually filled with big and small palaces and residences. They were originally hidden in the void, but as the energy from the spring of life grew stronger and stronger, they slowly reappeared one by one. Waves of verdant greenery appeared in the sky. In the distance, Duke Yu stood on the roof of the most magnificent Elf King Palace. He looked at the vigorous greenery appearing in the sky one after another. Numerous palaces appeared in the city of elves. Countless greenery began to gather and float in the sky. He couldn't help but burst into tears. The elf clan's 100,000-year dream. Today it's complete. It's finally complete. Chu Yang didn't enter the residences or palaces of the elves. He only took a few glances from afar. What he saw made him a lot of doubts. Sword Spirit, did you notice that these palaces seem to be green? And they seem to have vitality? Could it be that the palaces are alive? The Sword Spirit rolled his eyes. It would be strange if they were dead. Didn't you see that even the city of elves is green and has fluctuations of vitality? What's so strange about the palaces having vitality? Don't you know that the entire city of elves is made up of trees? It's essentially just a tree. Tree? A tree. Are you serious? Chu Yang was completely shocked. Looking around, there were flowers, grass, land, and buildings. Other than the color, it was no different from ordinary palaces and residences. These furniture were actually trees? You're saying, this entire city of elves is actually the internal space of a tree? Or actually, Chu Yang asked in shock. Are you an idiot? Do you still need to ask? It's the truth. The Sword Spirit smiled. This is the internal space of a big tree. To put it more simply, we're guests in a certain tree hole. Do you understand now? Boorish people? Chu Yang was completely dumbfounded. He was too shocked. He was so shocked that he didn't know how to react. What kind of tree was it? It was actually so big. The internal space of the tree could actually accommodate tens of millions of people. It could also provide for living, reproduction, construction, and other survival needs. Other plants definitely won't have the ability to resist being absorbed, the Sword Spirit said. So, as long as the elven tree exists, it's absolutely impossible for any heavenly treasures to exist in this forest. He smiled and said, actually, this isn't difficult to discover. When you were up there just now, did you discover even a single medicinal herb in such a big forest? Chu Yang recalled for a while, and was finally convinced. Indeed, there wasn't any. Not to mention heavenly treasures or emperor treasures. There wasn't even any ordinary medicinal herbs. But how could I have thought of these at that time? He was really convinced. At first, Chu Yang was still puzzled. Even in a remote mountain, there would be elixirs or medicinal herbs. But in such a vast and boundless forest, where there were hardly any traces of people, he actually didn't discover any. I see. The sword spirit said. So, inside the elven tree is the most complete treasure trove. Any medicinal herb, as long as it exists in this continent, can be found here. You'd better hurry up and work. This time we've really entered a treasure trove. Even if we only take one of each, our medicinal herb field can at least double. This is the most conservative estimate. Chu Yang sucked in a breath of cold air, and immediately continued working. But in his heart, he firmly memorized all the information about the elven tree. As the two walked, they collected elixirs along the way. With the recovery of the city of elves, the spiritual energy gradually became more abundant and dense, and they could discover more and more elixirs. Even with Chu Yang's cultivation, he actually felt that his arms were really working a little too frequently. He actually felt a little tired. Although he was happy and even inexplicably excited, he still felt tired, and there was a tendency for it to become more and more serious. There's still. Chu Yang's hands were sore, and a long-lost feeling of fatigue gradually surfaced in his heart. Sword Spirit, how many types of herbs have we collected in total? Chu Yang massaged his waist. The sword spirit did a rough calculation and said casually, "Not a lot. Just less than 2,000 types in total. It's still less than what I expected." Chu Yang was speechless. Chapter 1594. The medicine field in the tribulation space had at least doubled in size. Countless new elixirs were swaying in the medicine field. We've walked around this city of elves for so long. Even if we haven't finished walking around, we've already walked around more than half of it, right? Chu Yang asked. Yes, we're almost half of it. There's still a long way to go. The good stuff is still to come. The sword spirit was obviously still in high spirits. This was the real city of elves. This was actually the first time the sword spirit had come here. Since he had entered such a treasure mountain, how could he not return with a full load? Chu Yang fell to the ground. Damn it, I'm not doing this anymore. Damn it. More than half and less than half are two different concepts. I've been digging nonstop, and I still have to plant more. My waist hurts. I'm not doing this anymore. No wonder that bastard Dukyu is so generous. It turns out that there are so many elixirs here. There's so many that it's crushing. Just picking them all can tire me to death. Chu Yang said angrily. And I only took one. If I took all of them, how much would I get? The sword spirit said. Persevere a little longer. The more you persevere, the more you'll get. The longer you persevere, the more you'll get. Chu Yang shook his head like a rattledrum. Are you trying to fool me? I'm not a worker. Do you think I'm made of mud? I'm also a human being. I'll get tired too. But the problem now is that we've only found less than 10 elixirs that are 100,000 years old and still alive. The sword spirit was a little unwilling. Can't we just look for the high-end ones later? Let's not collect the low-end ones first. Is that okay? The sword spirit understood and relaxed the conditions. Chu Yang also readily followed the good advice. He stood up from the ground and stretched. Okay, now we'll only collect those that are 50,000 years old and above. The sword spirit rolled his eyes. Other people would think that there were too few treasures, but look at this person. He's already so impatient that he's about to throw them out. And he's only collecting those that are 50,000 years old and above. What kind of tone is this? A long time passed. The sword spirit suddenly moved. What's wrong? Minister Chu was startled, and hurriedly turned his head. I didn't expect that there would be such a good place here. I'm really going. The sword spirit looked ahead and said, This is really incredible. What kind of good thing is that? You're only talking about good things. I know what kind of good things you're talking about. Don't try to fool me. Minister Chu followed the sword spirit's gaze, and saw a withered tree standing majestically in a lush and verdant place. What the hell is this? I didn't find anything? Chu Yang searched for a long time, but didn't find any elixirs. Quick, look at that dead tree. The sword spirit panted. That's a good thing. That's the starwood I mentioned just now. The sword spirit was moved. Heavenly starwood. And from the looks of it, it is at least 100,000 years old. Oh my God. My God. Minister Chu was startled. He immediately jumped up. Are you sure? Starwood. Back then, old ancestor Chu Xiaoxin had to rob the big clans for a starwood that was the size of a tea box, and almost paid with his life. Just a space ring made of starwood was enough to cause a bloody battle in the martial world. There was actually a big tree here that even 3 to 5 people couldn't wrap their arms around. How many space rings could it make? Chu Yang was so happy that he almost fainted. In fact, the sword spirit was also dizzy. He spoke a little incoherently. There's actually such a complete tree here. This starwood is almost extinct even in the heavenly imperial court. There's actually so many of them here. Oh my God. I'm not dreaming, am I? If I'm dreaming, please let me wake up later. Then he shook Chu Yang. Quickly keep it. He kept them all away. This is a first-class good thing. With this tree, it doesn't matter if you don't have anything else. Of course, it's still best if you can keep it all. Chu Yang was also very excited. But just as he was about to move, he immediately stopped and said, I'll go and tell Duke you. It's fine if you don't tell him about the other herbs. After all, there are so many of them here. But this starwood is the only one. It's a priceless treasure with great significance. I'll be a beast if I don't tell him. The sword spirit cried out frantically. A beast is a beast. What's the big deal? For this starwood, so what if you're a beast for once? I beg you, just be a beast for once. Such a good thing, if Duke knows about it. How can he let you take it away? It's hard to find such a good thing in the world. If you give up this opportunity, you're worse than a beast. Chu Yang shook his head resolutely. I can't be worse than a beast. You go invisible. Then he raised his voice and shouted, Brother you, come over quickly. Silly, you're really worse than a beast. The invisible sword spirit stamped his feet. His face was full of annoyance, regret, pity, disappointment, and countless other negative emotions. With a whooshing sound, Duke flew over rapidly. He was very dissatisfied. What's the matter with you again? I'm busy over there. Hurry up and say it. Be straightforward. What's the big deal over there? Look over there and see what's that. Chu Yang pointed at the starwood. This is the legendary starwood. It can be used to make interspatial equipment. It's absolutely a unique treasure. Duke scratched his head. So what? If you like it, just take it away. Why are you showing off such a small thing to me? Showing off your good luck. Hearing this, the sword spirit, who was invisible, almost fainted. He almost couldn't control himself from revealing himself. Oh my God, what did I just hear? Oh my God. Starwood in this guy's mouth is actually what's the big deal? If you like it, just take it away. Why are you showing off such a small thing to me? Showing off your good luck. This. Is this still something a human would say? Is this something a human would say? Is this still reasonable? Is there still justice? Is this spirit too crazy? Or is the world too crazy? Or is it that I'm out of touch with the times, and starwood isn't that rare anymore? That's impossible, right? It's really infinitely terrifying. I believe that even if those super experts in the Heaven Imperial Court heard this, they would probably fall ill and have a few cerebral hemorrhages. This doesn't seem to be being generous anymore. This is squandering. And it's the kind of squandering that goes to the dark, absolutely limitless squandering. You mean you don't want it? Chu Yang was also greatly shocked by Duke attitude. He was puzzled. Originally, someone had planned to take advantage of this matter, to take advantage of Duke words. He would only relent after Duke said something nice about it. But now, I don't want it. What use do I have for this thing? Duke was also stunned. This thing was really meaningless to him. This, that. Chu Yang pulled his hair and spun around. He didn't know what to say anymore. Not to mention that the sword spirit was already speechless. Even Chu Yang was defeated by the person in front of him. This is a good thing that can be used to make space storage. Have you been kicked in the head by a donkey? Dukyu said matter-of-factly, I know. You don't have to repeat yourself. Even if it can be used to make space storage, what use is it to me? If you don't use it, it's completely meaningless. Can't you understand such a simple logic? The sword spirit was directly petrified. Chu Yang was also petrified. Dukyu looked at Chu Yang, as if he was looking at a bumpkin. He said disdainfully, You gave a spirit a plant in his home? And it's dead? Not to mention that this is originally a plant in our spirit city. Even if it's really a plant that's unique to you, I don't want it. If you want it, hurry up and take it away. Don't bother me anymore. I still have a lot of things to do. Is there anything else? Say it all. Don't bother me again and again. I'm not as free as you. Chu Yang was speechless. He raised both his hands and said, Okay. If you don't want it, I want it. Is that okay? I really want it. Dukyu's palm went down, and with a snap, the starwood was directly cut off from the roots. He shook his hand, and the tyrannical cultivation of a second-grade supreme martial artist gushed out. With a boom, the branches flew. He was only holding a 400 to 500 feet long tree trunk. He casually threw it to Chu Yang and said, Here, take it. You're long-winded. The tree trunk smashed over just like that. Chu Yang was still in a petrified state, and was almost smashed into a meat patty. He almost became the first tribulation sword master to be smashed to death by a tree trunk. The next moment, Elder Yu grabbed the ground, and pulled out a few roots of heavenly wood from the depths of the ground. He scratched them with his fingers, and found that they were actually a little green. He nodded with great satisfaction. Then he raised the roots and said to Chu Yang, Have you forgotten who I am? As long as I have this in my hands, I can get as much starwood as I want. I really don't know if you don't have a brain, or if there's mold in your brain. Chu Yang finally realized. He gritted his teeth and said, Damn it, I forgot that you're a royal elf. I admit defeat this time. You win. He didn't stand on ceremony, and directly put the big piece of starwood into the tribulation space. As a royal elf, as long as he was given a little vitality of any plant, he would be able to catalyze it. Therefore, to an elf, no matter how precious a plant was, it might not be worth his attention. He could like it and cherish it, but if he fought with his life for treasures, he would only cross his arms and watch from the side. Therefore, a certain king of hell was really pitiful this time. His intentions were commendable, but his stupidity was unforgivable. You actually called me over for a plant that has long withered. You're really too much. Dukyu muttered to himself, I don't know if you're crazy or if this world is crazy. Calling a pure-blooded royal elf over for a share of the spoils for a plant that has long withered. Sigh. Shaking his head, his body flashed, and in a trance he disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1595. In fact, the sword spirit had been worried that Dukyu would come to blows once he arrived. In fact, he might even swallow his pride and refuse to give it to Dukyu. In fact, the sword spirit had even prepared himself to attack Dukyu in case he refused to give it to Dukyu. Even if Chu Yang was unhappy afterwards, he couldn't care less. That was heavenly wood. Who would have thought that it would end like this? I'm the tribulation sword spirit, yet I'm being despised so thoroughly. No, it's not just despised, it's ignored. What the hell is this? I regard it as a supreme treasure. But he doesn't even care about it. Are elves so arrogant? The elf race. The sword spirit was speechless for a while. Then, he finally said in a depressed manner, They have always been so arrogant since ancient times. He is the only one in the world, but he is still like this. Don't ask me for help in the future. If you ask me for help, I will make things difficult for you. Chu Yang bared his teeth. Shut up. Don't embarrass me. Continue the treasure hunt. Hurry up. We've harvested a total of 578 kinds of herbs. They've all been stored in the tribulation space. They're all alive and growing well. The sword spirit breathed a sigh of relief. These are all good things in the city of elves. They naturally have the aura of elves. It's rare even in the heavenly imperial court. Chu Yang nodded and said, But the aura of immortals isn't present in the things here. The sword spirit said proudly, Of course. Don't be intoxicated. We still have important things to do. Do you feel any news about the 8th fragment of the tribulation sword? Chu Yang asked. No, the sword spirit said. I don't feel anything at all. This seems a little strange. After thinking for a while, he said, or, you need to take out the whole tribulation sword and release sword energy to attract it. I believe there'll be a reaction. Chu Yang nodded. The sword spirit's body swayed and entered the tribulation space. Chu Yang's mind moved. With just a thought, the sword tip, sword edge, sword guard and sword pommel of the tribulation sword appeared in the city of elves at the same time. The city of elves shone brightly and formed a complete sword in the air. The tribulation sword arrived at the city of elves. Chi 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 chi. Majestic sword chi crisscrossed, shuttling back and forth in the city of elves, slicing this space that was filled with spiritual mist into pieces. Duke Yu, who was busy with something in the royal palace, suddenly felt a biting cold murderous aura outside. Sword energy was everywhere. But he thought that an enemy had intruded into the city of elves. He was in the middle of a fierce battle with Chu Yang. He was startled and flew out. He had barely stood on the roof when a dazzling light rushed towards him like a bolt of lightning. What's going on? What kind of enemy is it that Chu Yang has to use the Calamity Sword to defend against the enemy? Duke Yu was suspicious. Could it be that a powerful enemy has broken into this place? Just as he was thinking, the Calamity Sword had already arrived in front of him with the sound of wind and thunder. A thought flashed through Duke Yu's mind. Then, he stood motionless in his original place. The Calamity Sword circled around and suddenly flew straight into the elven palace. Chu Yang flew over at lightning speed from behind. But he was caught by Duke Yu. What happened? How did you get the Calamity Sword out? Chu Yang said excitedly. What else could it be? I found the 8th fragment of the Calamity Sword. It's the luck of your elves to find the Calamity Sword here. The 8th fragment of the Calamity Sword? Is it that thing? Is it real? Duke Yu was stunned. Why would this thing appear in the city of elves that hasn't appeared for 100,000 years? Didn't it appear 8 times before? This doesn't make sense, right? Regarding this question, Chu Yang really didn't know how to explain it. He said vaguely, who knows, maybe it's crazy. At this time, an unusually sharp sword whistling sound came from the elven palace. It seemed that the Calamity Sword couldn't wait to urge Chu Yang to enter. Chu Yang and Duke Yu looked at each other, and the two entered side by side. They saw the Calamity Sword flying back and forth in the spacious hall. Round after round, it was like a silver light, weaving the entire hall into a bright cocoon. The moment they entered here, Chu Yang suddenly felt it. It was as if there was an unusually soft emotion that wrapped around him. It was as if at this moment, his heart also became a little sour and happy. In an instant, it was as if he was back to Emo Qinggu in a red dress, dancing gracefully in the endless snow. Her gaze was filled with tenderness, and her expression was melancholic and affectionate. One dance for you, and I'll fall in love with you forever. Chu Yang's heart felt as if it had been hit hard, and he was suddenly stunned. Why did he suddenly have such a feeling here? There seemed to be something strange. In a flash, his gaze focused somewhere. There was actually another person in the elven palace. She was sitting on the elven throne. Her clothes were whiter than snow, and her hair was like clouds. She was tall and curvaceous. Chu Yang opened his eyes with rapt attention. Under the impact of his mind, he couldn't help but be stunned. For a moment, there was actually a feeling of space-time disorder, as if countless space-time fragments had all rushed into his mind at this moment. This person who shouldn't have existed had picturesque features and an extremely beautiful face. Even saying that she was devastatingly beautiful was not enough to describe her. She was truly peerless and difficult to describe. It could be said that she was the most beautiful person Chu Yang had ever seen in his life. In Chu Yang's mind, Mo Qingwu, Tai Butian, Wu Qianqian and Zi Xieching were already the most beautiful women in the world. Each of them had their own strengths, and they were already the most beautiful women in the world. However, this understanding had been shattered at this very moment, because the person in front of him, this person gave Chu Yang the feeling that she was even more graceful than these 4 women. She was sitting peacefully on the elven throne, but she gave people a magical feeling of like an ethereal fairy, like the moonlight in the heavenly palace, bright and sacred, like a snow lotus on an iceberg, untainted by a speck of dust. like the scorching sun in the sky, shining on the world. That was a subtle feeling of only being admired from afar, not being touched. This woman opened her eyes slightly, as if she was looking forward in a trance. Her jade-like right hand was gently holding the armrest of the throne. Her body was slightly tilted, and there was a languid and leisurely feeling. However, this leisurely feeling also concealed a sense of being the ruler of the world. It was as if she was just sitting there, and countless experts and subjects of the world were already prostrating and worshipping before her. And she was receiving the worship of her subjects. That was all. Her pair of eyes seemed to be tired, and also seemed to be worried. They were slightly squinted, but the expression in her eyes was constantly changing. Every moment, there seemed to be subtle changes in her expression. It was as if she was pitying the common people, as if she was plotting a great plan, as if such a woman was clearly the ruler of the world, the ruler of the world, the ruler of the world. However, she gave people a feeling of wanting to love and protect her. Yet, this feeling was always hidden in the bottom of their hearts. Once it was revealed, they would blaspheme her, and would not dare to go forward. All kinds of strange, contradictory and subtle feelings were intertwined, forming this extremely strange aura in front of them. In this place in front of her, it seemed that they could be incomparably relaxed. They could feel endless gentleness, and they could get everything they wanted. However, their hands and feet were tied, and they did not dare to act rashly. This woman had attracted Chu Yang's attention at the very first moment. Besides, an extremely strange feeling rose in Chu Yang's heart. He had actually seen this woman before, and it was the kind that he was very, very familiar with. How could it be? It was impossible, right? That familiarity was indescribable. It was so familiar that when it came to her, just one look would make his heart ache beside him. Dukyu coughed softly. In front of this woman, Dukyu, who had always been lawless, actually held his breath and kept quiet out of fear. Even when he reminded Chu Yang, he only dared to cover his mouth with his hand and cough softly. Only then did Chu Yang come back to his senses. He instinctively bowed. "Are you an elder of the elf race?" That woman sat on the throne. Her gaze seemed to have glanced at him lightly, but she did not speak. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hall seemed to be somewhat stifling. "This is the elven empress of our elf race from 100,000 years ago," Dukyu said softly to Chu Yang. "You don't have to greet her anymore. She can't hear what you say. It's just a body in front of you. She has already passed away 100,000 years ago." "Ah? What did you say?" Chu Yang was shocked. He raised his head again. However, he noticed that the elven empress' eyes seemed to have sensed his gaze. Those slightly squinted eyes were also looking back at him. This was clearly the action of a living being. How could it be? How could it be just a body without a soul? The elven empress' skills were unparalleled since ancient times. Although she has unfortunately passed away, her body has not decayed even after millions of years. In addition, her aura still exists, and it will last forever, Dukyu said softly. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. He stared at the elven empress. When he thought that this beautiful body was actually lifeless, he suddenly felt a heart-wrenching pain. In that instant, he actually had the urge to cry. Even he himself did not know why he had such a feeling. Chu Yang had seen many beauties. Although the elven empress in front of him was unbelievably beautiful, Chu Yang was not the kind of person who could be moved by beauty. It was simply incomprehensible for him to have such a feeling. During the great calamity of the world, the elf race lived a very pure life. In order to maintain the purity of the city of elves, all the clansmen felt that it was hopeless to pass the calamity. They buried their clansmen's bodies under the city of elves, and then sank into the ground themselves. They slept with the world. The elven empress' skills were unparalleled. If she was alone, she would have the confidence to pass this calamity. However, the elven empress made another choice. I continued to write the third update to make up for it. The second and third chapters are basically connected, so I continued to write. Now, the third chapter has less than 1,000 words. Hee. I heard that everyone is guessing who the 8th person of the calamity is. They even set up a bet. I wonder if I can join in the bet. I'm so embarrassed. Chapter 1596. Duke Yu said solemnly. Her Majesty the Empress gave up her supreme cultivation and used all of her cultivation to sink the entire city of fairies into the ground and preserve it here. She also destroyed all of her divine sense and turned it into a protective shield for the city of fairies. This is how she managed to preserve the city of fairies until now. Chu Yang was silent for a moment. Feeling the sorrow and depression in his heart, he asked softly, "Do you know, what is the name of this great empress?" Duke Yu said, "The great empress' surname is Wu. Her honorific name is Wu Qiongxiao." Wu Qiongxiao. Chu Yang murmured this name. He couldn't help but look over again. The elven empress' calm, but dignified gaze also seemed to look back at him calmly at this moment. Chu Yang felt his heart throbbing violently once again. As he looked around, he realized that there were many other decorations in the hall. On the left and right walls, there was a piece of calligraphy hanging on each wall. The handwriting was the same. It was obvious that they were all written by the elven empress. While the handwriting was elegant, it also revealed a boundless majesty and dominance. On the left was, Yuping life's wish breaking weight Wu Qiongxiao sweeping heaven tower. Not peerless, not breaking heaven. Chu Yang's heart trembled. This great empress is really heroic. Not peerless and invincible. She would rather stay here than break through the void and ascend. On the right wall, there were only 5 simple words. I dance alone in the wind and cloud. Dance alone in the wind and cloud. Could it be that there was actually no one in the world who could compete with her back then? Chu Yang looked at it carefully again. The empress' gaze actually followed him again. This time, Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. This time, he didn't shift his gaze away for a long time. Nobody knew how much time had passed. Perhaps it was the blink of an eye, or perhaps it was a lifetime. Suddenly, a crashing sound broke the silence. On both sides of the empress's throne, a piece of snow-white paper suddenly flowed out. With a schwa sound, it directly extended from the 2 armrests of the throne to several feet, and lay flat on the ground. It was as if the elven empress had suddenly stood up. Her figure was graceful, and her snow-white long sleeves fluttered in the air. It was also as if she had just finished dancing in the sky. She was so beautiful that she was sleepy, and she reclined on a chair to rest. Her long sleeves dragged on the ground, and only her endless gentleness remained. Although it was just 2 pieces of white paper that had suddenly appeared, the peerless charm of this moment was deeply imprinted in everyone's mind. Duke Yu exclaimed, "But this kind of phenomenon didn't happen when I was here. So, why did Chu Yang trigger such a strange phenomenon when he arrived? What was the reason? And what kind of changes would this change bring about?" At this moment, words abruptly appeared on the originally spotless white paper. Golden words flickered from nothingness and gradually appeared on the white paper. Chu Yang focused his gaze and looked. On the first piece of paper on the left was written, "Who will accompany me, dancing in the wind and clouds?" On the second piece of paper on the right was written, "Who will accompany me, arrogant in the world?" These 2 lines of words were actually questions. Who will accompany me, dancing in the wind and clouds? Who will accompany me, arrogant in the world? Although it was a question, the arrogant aura in it was, as if it could swallow heaven and earth. It was peerless and unparalleled. Perhaps, only the 2 of them could accompany each other. That peerless and proud expression seemed to cross over 100,000 years and come from the sky. It was arrogance and aloofness, but it was also loneliness and loneliness. Moreover, there was a trace of helplessness. Chu Yang was startled, and he suddenly raised his head. The empress was still sitting gracefully like she had been a day ago. Her slightly narrowed eyes seemed to be staring at him closely. That aura of a monarch descending to the world seemed to hit him in the face at any time. Chu Yang suddenly understood where the sense of familiarity that he felt came from. That kind of gaze, gentleness, affection, and the charm between her eyebrows. This elven empress was actually so similar to Mo Qinggu. Although their appearances were very different, Chu Yang had felt that kind of special feeling from Mo Qinggu countless times. And that kind of majestic aura of a monarch descending to the world was so similar to Tai Buyao's. It was the same empress who pitted the world and cherished the world. Also, the strength in her bones and the tenderness in her tenacity were no different from Wu Qianqian's. They were shockingly similar. Finally, that heroic spirit and carefree spirit of moving unhindered and killing all over the world was exactly the same as Zi Xieching's. Chu Yang's heart changed for a while. He connected the characteristics of Mo Qingwu, Wu Qianqian, Zi Xieching, and Tai Buyao together. After mixing them together, he closed his eyes and felt that the fairy empress was standing calmly in front of him. Suddenly, Chu Yang's heart ached so much that it hurt. How many years have you been lonely? How many years have you been looking forward to? And how many years have you been helpless? Who will accompany me, dancing in the wind and clouds? Who will accompany me, arrogant in the world? Chu Yang's heart was agitated, and his blood was boiling. He suddenly blurted out, "Me. I'll accompany you. I'll accompany you. I'll accompany you, dancing in the wind and clouds. I'll accompany you, arrogant in the world." While his voice was still echoing, the elven empress' slightly narrowed eyes seemed to suddenly flash. Then an illusory long sigh, as if a burden had been lifted off her shoulders, rang out. Then a ball of colorful light suddenly erupted from the elven empress' body. At first, it was just a faint glow, but gradually, that graceful and elegant figure could no longer be seen. A soft and affectionate voice, yet illusory like a dream, recited, "You accompany me dancing in the wind and clouds. I accompany you arrogantly in the world." Suddenly, an inexplicable ray of light flashed out from the elven empress' body, as if it was reluctant to leave. It circled around the hall once, and then broke through the air like lightning, disappearing without a trace. The only direction that was known was the east. Both of them were shocked by this turn of events. They were so shocked that they were almost speechless, and could only stare blankly. Then, the light on the elven empress' body seemed to have dimmed a little. Then, another ray of light separated from her body, circled the hall once, and rushed out of the door, disappearing without a trace. This time, the direction that it went was due west. Then another 2 rays of light flashed one after another, one in the south and one in the north. They also disappeared without a trace. As the 4 rays of light gradually disappeared, another unforeseen event occurred. Both of them fixed their eyes on the elven empress again, and they were both shocked. They saw that the elven emperor's throne was already empty. The elven empress Wu Qianxiao, who was still there just now, had disappeared. It was as if she had turned into 4 rays of light just now, and drifted away with the breeze, no longer existing in this world. All of the past and traces of her existence were just a dream, and everything had turned into an illusion. Only a soft sigh, which seemed to have come from the underworld, seemed to still reverberate faintly in the hall. Both of them felt as if they had an extremely bizarre dream. They were at a loss, and even until now, they still felt that it was unreal. Her Majesty the Elven Empress actually disappeared just like that? How could it be? Duke Yu felt lost. Chu Yang took a deep breath, but he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart. Although he was still a little disappointed, he felt as if he had accomplished something in his heart, and was actually exceptionally relaxed. He even felt a little strange about his own mentality. It was only reasonable that he should be disappointed and sad. How could it be like this? However, in Chu Yang's heart, there seemed to be a faint feeling that the Elven Empress hadn't really disappeared. That aura seemed to still be reverberating around him, or even it had always been there, and had never left at all. Before, after. You accompanied me, Qiongxiao, to dance with the wind and clouds. I accompanied you to conquer the world, Chu Yang murmured. He looked at the empty throne thoughtfully, but inexplicably, for figures appeared in his heart. Mo Qingwu, Wu Qianqian, Tai Buyao, Zi Xieching. Just as the 2 of them were in a daze, light suddenly appeared on the throne again. A sparkling thing suddenly rose up, bringing with it a kind of long-lost excitement, as well as a kind of pleasant surprise of regaining something that had been lost. That's Her Majesty's Eternal Jade Sky Golden Buyao. Duke Yu's eyes flashed and he explained. Unexpectedly, the Calamity Sword suddenly let out a sword cry, and suddenly leaped into the air like a dragon. As if it was extremely excited, it shuttled back and forth in the air. A clear sound of pleasant surprise, with a little bit of shyness, suddenly appeared. The Eternal Jade Sky Golden Buyao of the Elven Empress suddenly emitted a dazzling milky white brilliance. Then, the brilliance suddenly paused, and actually transformed into something that looked very soft, swaying in the air. Sword tassel! It's a sword tassel! Chu Yang's eyes focused, and his breathing almost stopped. After the golden buyao changed its new form, it actually turned into a sword tassel, infinitely soft, infinitely affectionate, and infinitely attached. Floating in the air, it faintly gave off a delicate and pitiful feeling. Sword tassel! Chu Yang only felt an inexplicable surge in his heart. Now, he didn't have the pleasant surprise of finally finding the 8th fragment of the Calamity Sword at all. Instead, he was filled with a kind of infinite gentle joy of regaining something that had been lost. He couldn't wait to take 2 steps forward, his face a little red. His right hand trembled uncontrollably, and he slowly stretched it out. The sword tassel floated pitifully in the air, as if it was waiting for something, and also nervous about something. When it saw Chu Yang stretch out his hand to it, it seemed to finally be relieved, and gently floated down from the air, steadily and smoothly falling into Chu Yang's palm. An incomparably familiar and infinitely gentle feeling of satisfaction rose in Chu Yang's heart. Chu Yang even had an inexplicable impulse to put the sword tassel on his mouth and kiss it. Chu Yang gently picked up the sword tassel and gently pressed it against his face. Feeling that extremely soft and intimate touch, he was inexplicably happy and gratified. The Calamity Sword, which was still in midair, let out an extremely loud sword cry. The sword tassel flew up from Chu Yang's hand and agilely went up to meet it. Silently, the first 7 fragments of the sword and the sword tassel merged together. Suddenly, a burst of dazzling light shot up into the air and actually soared for tens of thousands of miles. It was unknown how high it was, or how far it was. The Calamity Sword shuttled back and forth in the air, and in Chu Yang's calamity space, the sword spirit's expression was unusually solemn, and he sat cross-legged. A voice slowly sounded in Chu Yang's mind, gentle and clear, with infinite affection, as if it was singing and dancing, singing and dancing. Chu Yang's dreamlike feeling rose again. Chapter 1597. This was the 8th sword technique of the Calamity Sword. Chu Yang's body shook violently, and he almost fainted, because he was not unfamiliar with this sword technique at all. Was it the poem that Shuelehan had written that day? Could it be? So this was the sword technique of the Calamity Sword. Chu Yang felt that his brain was not enough to comprehend. So Qinggu was the last calamity that had yet to appear. But wasn't the Calamity Sword not allowed to have women? And not allowed to have the same surname? Why? Why was it so strange? However, in the Calamity space, the moment these 4 sword techniques sounded, the sword spirit stood up. An illusory sword appeared in his hand, and he slowly waved it. The 8th sword technique of the Calamity Sword. It had finally appeared. Only now could the Calamity Sword be said to be complete. The sword body, the sword hilt, the sword tassel, the entire sword was complete. As Chu Yang expected, the sword technique accompanying the sword tassel of the Calamity Sword focused on softness. Endless murderous intent was displayed amidst the infinite gentleness. Unknowingly and unknowingly, the layout was completed, and the final kill was achieved. The sword tassel accompanying the sword technique meant that hard cannot last long and soft cannot be defended. The basic concept was to wait for the enemy's sharpness to be slightly dampened before immediately launching the sharpest counterattack. These 4 sword techniques were the rare defensive and offensive moves of the Calamity Sword technique. But in terms of destructive power, they were not inferior to the previous moves. Moreover, the attack power of this move was highly concentrated. It was really a killer move that could be used to counterattack. As light as a dream, it was gradually accumulating power, while floating and defending, while protecting oneself so that wind and rain could not penetrate. It was accumulating power bit by bit. As enchanting as a sea of blood and a mountain of bones, it was the continuous accumulation of power before the defense was activated. It formed a special force field that was completely formed within the defense without the enemy's knowledge. Lord Asked, who wielded his sword for 1,000 miles, once again revealed his sharpness and began to counterattack. He fought for the relative initiative and the initiative. His moves were extremely complicated and ingenious. Brilliant moves were used to confuse the enemy. He had to give the enemy a huge shock and recover his previous passive situation. And on the basis of the first three moves, the fourth move was a fatal blow. Life and death followed to the heavens. Fatal blow, fatal blow, fatal blow. By the time this move was unleashed, the accumulated power had already exceeded the user's cultivation by tens of times. This kind of power far exceeded the user's own limits. According to normal logic, after this move was made, it was unknown whether or not it could hit the enemy. However, this power had already been released and returned to nothingness. However, these four moves were connected in an ingenious way. The power of each move was intercepted, even including the power of the enemy's previous attack. Therefore, when the last move was launched, it was equivalent to adding the power of both the enemy and himself together, multiplying the power by several times. Suddenly, a sharp counterattack was launched. Who could block such an attack? It was precisely because of the combination of the enemy's strength that it was called life and death entanglement. Since it was a decisive battle, of course, it would be one life and one death. There was no doubt about it. As for reaching the sky, it would send the enemy straight to the Western Paradise. How could it be limited to just reaching the sky? The power of the four moves combined into one was really unimaginable. Even the most conservative estimate was that it was more than 20 times Chu Yang's peak battle power. Of course, this power did not mean that it really increased Chu Yang's strength by 20 times. To achieve this kind of superpower, there was a prerequisite, and that was that Chu Yang could use these four moves continuously. As long as this process was completed smoothly, Chu Yang could definitely kill all enemies above his level. This even included experts at the level of Supreme Martial Artist. As for those above the level of Supreme Martial Artist, they were not people that Chu Yang could deal with at present. However, such people did not exist in the heavens. Secondly, such enemies were more knowledgeable and would definitely not give Chu Yang the chance to use these four moves. Therefore, he did not consider it. Chu Yang closed his eyes. He seemed to be thinking about something, but in fact, his spirit was immersed in the tribulation space to practice his sword. The real complete tribulation sword shone in his hand, and the newly added sword tassel lay gently on his hand. He performed the sword moves over and over again. Every time he used them, he would have a completely new understanding. Chu Yang was surprised to find that his cultivation was advancing rapidly in this gentle atmosphere. Unknowingly, he had taken another big step forward. New spiritual energy like soft water constantly came from the tribulation sword and entered his body, into his meridians. This was also the power derived from the return of the sword tassel. Chu Yang focused on practicing his sword and was unaware of this change. It was only when a roar that sounded like an explosion suddenly came from his body that Chu Yang realized that he had inexplicably broken through to the level of a 7th-grade supreme martial artist. Previously, except for Rui Butong, who had broken through to the level of a 7th-grade supreme martial artist, by chance due to the Phoenix Clan's Nirvana technique, his cultivation leaped to become the top of the brothers. Tribulation, and the others were all stuck at the level of supreme martial artist. Even Chu Yang, the master of the tribulation sword, was no exception. Although a breakthrough was a matter of time, this sooner or later was an unknown. Now not only did the sword tassel return smoothly, the bottleneck that had not been broken for a long time was also broken. This was a happy occasion. Chu Yang sensed that his cultivation had broken through. While he was happy, he also felt that the power of the sword tassel did not disappear, because he had broken through the bottleneck. It was still pouring in endlessly, pushing the cultivation that had just broken through the bottleneck to continue to climb, from slow to fast, gradually increasing in speed and rushing forward. Could this be the benefit brought about by the return of the 8th fragment of the tribulation sword? Chu Yang asked in his heart. Naturally, the person who asked this question could not be anyone else but the sword spirit. However, the sword spirit ignored Chu Yang's question and did not answer. Chu Yang continued to concentrate on practicing his sword. However, at this moment, he was already somewhat familiar with the trajectories of these four moves. When he grasped some of the key points, he was extremely shocked to find that his current cultivation had actually been rushed to the peak of a 7th grade supreme martial artist. It seemed that he could break through to the 8th grade at any time. What's going on? Is it an illusion? It can't be. Chu Yang was stunned. It was no wonder that Chu Yang was puzzled and surprised. One must know that above the level of supreme martial artist, every advancement required countless years of practice, and the level of cultivation required was often more than 10 times, or even 100 times more than before. For example, if one only needed 1 drop of energy to break through to a 2nd grade supreme martial artist, then one would need at least 100 drops of energy to break through to a 3rd grade supreme martial artist. On the other hand, if one only needed the energy of 1 mountain to break through to a 7th grade supreme martial artist, then one would need the energy of 1,000 mountains to break through to an 8th grade supreme martial artist. This was how it increased, almost at a crazy geometric rate. This was also why people like Xiao Qinyu, Li Chuanbua, and the others could only stop at the level of supreme martial artist after more than 10,000 years of cultivation. It was really the reason why it was harder to break through the later stages of cultivation. It was also why, although Bu Luqing and the others were only at the peak of a 2nd grade supreme martial artist, they formed an absolute pressure on all the experts of the same grade, and even higher level. It was also because of this. I don't know this time either. I really don't know. The sword spirit finally spoke. When the previous owners of the Calamity Sword received the 8th fragment of the Calamity Sword, their experiences were completely different from yours. They didn't receive any energy transfer from the sword tassel, only the benefits of the Calamity Sword. But you, before you received the benefits of the Calamity Sword, you received such a huge gift of energy first. It's really strange, really strange. A thought flashed through Chu Yang's mind. Then he thoughtfully said, "Do you think that this sword tassel didn't give me any energy before this? But it's now giving me all the energy that it has accumulated for more than 10,000 years? If not, there's really no way to explain such a powerful source of energy. Your analysis is very likely. Other than that, it's really hard to explain." The sword spirit said seriously. "Maybe it's because you're the last owner of the Calamity Sword, and also the true owner of the Calamity Sword. It's reasonable for the sword tassel to have such an abnormality." Chu Yang made no sound. Although he was still surprised by this change in his heart, he didn't dwell on it anymore. Although this change was shocking, it was only beneficial to him. After eating a few elixirs, and drinking a few mouthfuls of spring water from the spring of life, the energy given by the sword tassel was still flowing in continuously. It was as if a woman had waited for her lover for 100,000 years, and couldn't wait to give everything she had to him completely. Finally, it was time to break through to the 8th grade. Chu Yang was even prepared to endure an extremely difficult breakthrough journey. But who would have thought that he didn't feel the breakthrough for a long time? Even at the moment of breakthrough, it was as if a layer of window paper had been poked open. There was almost no obstruction at all. The whole process was extremely fast, and he didn't feel any pain at all. This is too abnormal, isn't it? I'm already an 8th grade supreme martial artist? Are you kidding me? Chu Yang's scalp was numb by this process. It was so strangely smooth that he hadn't even dreamed of it before. It was so smooth that it made his heart palpitate and fluster. However, the spiritual energy was still flowing endlessly, as if there was no end to it. Chu Yang didn't practice the sword at this time, and only helplessly watched his meridians being filled with spiritual energy that suddenly came out of nowhere. Then it swelled again, and in an indescribable gentleness, it gradually continued to push forward. Elementary grade continued to push forward. The speed might be very slow, but it didn't have any intention of stopping at all. It moved forward firmly and persistently, completely ignoring all resistance. This is a good thing, but isn't it a little too good? What the hell? Chu Yang and the sword spirit sighed at the same time. Chapter 1598. Dream on. The sword spirit snorted. Do you think it's so easy to reach the supreme grade? Even if you're the tribulation sword master, You still need to cultivate, accumulate, and gain experience. How can you reach the top in one step? However, less than a quarter of an hour after the Sword Spirit finished speaking, Chu Yang already said strangely, "Sword Spirit, I'm already at the peak of 8th grade supreme martial artist now. I'm definitely not joking. I'm absolutely serious. How is this possible?" The Sword Spirit was instantly petrified. This was too exaggerated. He was already at the peak of 8th grade supreme martial artist. He had just said that it was impossible in his dreams. Could his dreams really come true? Could he really reach the top in one step? Just as Chu Yang was shocked and speechless, and the Sword Spirit was petrified and in disbelief, the spiritual energy in Chu Yang's meridians began to gradually boil and slowly accumulate, forming a situation similar to that on the eve of a tsunami. It seemed that if he moved even a little, the mountains would collapse, and the earth would split open at any time. Chu Yang held his forehead with one hand and sighed softly, not knowing whether it was a blessing or a curse. He smiled bitterly, and turned to look at his dantian. With one look, he couldn't help but let out a hiss. Previously, there were only 100 or so strands of primordial real silk, but now there were more than 1,000 strands. It had actually increased by almost 10 times, and seemed to be continuing to increase. When did this thing become so much? What exactly is going on? Chu Yang opened his eyes, and looked at the sword tassel attached to the back of his hand. He said softly, "Sword tassel, is this also given to me by you?" The sword tassel slid gently across the back of his hand with infinite tenderness. The next moment, Chu Yang only felt the internal energy in his body suddenly explode violently. His whole body also seemed to completely shatter at that moment. Even his consciousness turned into stars and scattered all over the sky. Then, an unprecedented feeling of ease arose spontaneously. In the outside world, Chu Yang's clothes turned into ashes with the sudden explosion of his internal energy. His whole body was clean and smooth, without a trace. With the explosion of his internal energy, spots of black filth suddenly appeared on the surface of Chu Yang's body. The black filth gradually increased and gradually covered his whole body. The filth had a pungent smell that made one feel nauseous. Apart from the unpleasant smell, the black filth was almost liquid in nature and extremely viscous. Although it looked black, it gave people a feeling of transparency. Chu Yang was completely unaware of all these changes. The true elemental energy in his body was flowing like a clear and transparent river. However, there was an abnormally heavy aura coming from his body. Like the majestic clouds and mountains, the vast earth. At the side, Dukyu let out a heartfelt sigh of envy. Dukyu wasn't unfamiliar with Chu Yang's current situation. He had also experienced it before, supreme grade, heavenly spirit body refinement. Within his body, his muscles, bones, meridians, and organs, all the impurities and impurities within his body were expelled at this moment. Only at this moment would a cultivator have a great opportunity to gain enlightenment. That was the Earth realm, Earth level. However, in the Chongtian continent, this heaven-bestowed enlightenment was called heaven-bestowed immortal opportunity. This was because only at the moment of breakthrough would there be such an opportunity to gain enlightenment. If one could grab hold of it, it would be a great opportunity. If one couldn't grab hold of it, then it would be missed forever, because it would never appear again. When Dukyu broke through, he had grabbed hold of such an opportunity for a full 15 minutes. As far as he knew, such an opportunity was mostly just a flash in the pan for most people. There weren't many who had more than a normal person's breath. That time, he had grabbed hold of it for a full 15 minutes. This time limit could definitely be said to be above the universe, looking down on the past and present. Now such a heaven-bestowed immortal opportunity had also appeared in Chu Yang. Would Chu Yang be able to grab hold of this opportunity? If he did, how long would he be able to grab hold of it? Chu Yang's state of mind had already entered an extremely mysterious realm at this moment. It was as if he was surrounded by heavy soil, but it was filled with an ancient aura of life. At the moment when he broke through to supreme grade, he finally understood. Why would a supreme grade's strength be so terrifying? Almost able to stand above all things in the world, almost able to break the laws of nature and be invincible. All of this was because a supreme-grade martial artist could already peek into the way of the earth. Chu Yang suddenly felt a little ironic. Originally, the entire continent had been talking about the heavenly Tao and was trying to break through the so-called heavenly Tao. But he didn't expect that all martial artists were actually so far away from the path of the heavenly Tao. As a human, one had to first cultivate the human path. Then, who knew how long it would take before one could talk about the way of the earth? After the way of the earth, it was the way of the heavenly Tao, the way of the heavens. After that, it was the great Tao. But how could the way of the heavens be so easy to prove? Chu Yang chuckled. He wandered in this land of earth aura that had suddenly appeared and existed for an unknown period of time. He didn't think of anything, and didn't even want to get any specific enlightenment from here. His mind was clean, like a piece of white paper without any color, floating freely in this land of earth realm. No heart, no thoughts, no thoughts, no thoughts, no intentions, no desires, no hopes, no fights, no demands, nothing at all. In the surroundings, there was a constant stream of earthy yellow light flying past. Those that stuck to the white paper stuck to it, and slipped away from the side. Just like that, they slipped away. Everything was up to fate. Time passed by quietly just like that. A breath passed by. 2 breaths passed by. 10 breaths passed by. 15 minutes passed by. Dukyu stood quietly at the side, watching Chu Yang attentively. At this moment, the impurities that had appeared on Chu Yang's body, due to his advancement to the supreme martial artist level, slowly dried up, as Chu Yang's cultivation continued to increase. Gradually, they left the surface of his skin. In the next moment, they scattered into pieces of smelly dust, and then disappeared. After a while, even the smell was gone. It was as if Chu Yang hadn't gone through such a cleansing of his muscles and marrow. However, if Minister Chu wasn't completely clean, then it would really be as if nothing had happened. Dukyu believed that even if Chu Yang woke up, he might not be unaware of everything that had just happened. However, his body was definitely different from before, and it was very different. If his previous body was the earth, then his current body was the high and mighty sky. This was because the cleansing of the marrow and tendons had truly happened before. Dukyu couldn't help but sigh. When he had just broken through, he also didn't know about the changes. Until now, when he saw Chu Yang's breakthrough, he knew that he must have experienced such changes before. Not bad. It's been close to 15 minutes. I wonder if he can reach my level. Dukyu's face revealed an admiring expression. Dukyu was already very surprised that Chu Yang could retain this kind of enlightenment for such a long time. The innate talent of elves in understanding the nature of the world was far above that of humans. An ordinary elf's comprehension ability was far stronger than that of humans. As a pure-blooded royal elf, Dukyu naturally thought that his comprehension ability was undoubtedly the strongest. This was the pride of his race. In fact, Dukyu's pride definitely had the qualifications to be so. Looking at the entire heavenly layer, in the past 100,000 years, there were only a few humans who could be compared to Dukyu. Even the previous masters of the Calamity Sword were far inferior to him. At this moment, seeing that Chu Yang was actually so talented and almost catching up with him, how could he not be shocked? However, he was still lacking by a bit. He should wake up soon. However, as time passed, in the next moment, Dukyu's expression gradually became unsightly. Why isn't it over yet? He's already on par with me. This shouldn't be, it's almost there. After that, Dukyu was completely stunned. Surpass me, actually surpass me. You've already surpassed me. It's time to wake up. After that, 30 minutes passed, and Chu Yang still hadn't woken up. 2 hours passed. Chu Yang was still comprehending. While Chu Yang was comprehending, Dukyu was already petrified. He was so shocked that he was completely speechless. This is a monster. Hiss. Dukyu sucked in cold air and shook his head repeatedly. This guy is definitely not human. How can a human comprehend for such a long time? This really makes me speechless. Chu Yang didn't know how much time had passed, but he knew that it seemed to have been a long time. Just as he entered the earth realm, he heard a cracking sound coming from his body. When he looked inside himself, he was immediately surprised. He saw that his dantian had actually exploded. The next moment, it was reorganized again. His dantian had actually turned into a shape that was very similar to a star. In the center there was a circle. In the circle, a small calamity sword floated quietly. The surroundings were surrounded by patches of primordial real silk that were purple and lustrous. And the outermost part was the corner of a star. One corner was azure in color. Right now, it had already filled a little bit of almost 1/10 of the space. As for the others, they were either golden in color, green in color, or only a little bit of each color. As for the corner closest to the azure region, it was earthy yellow in color. Right now, there were countless earthy yellow specks of energy that were densely packed and surging towards the center of the region. Once the khaki-colored energy surged in, it was immediately compressed. Visually, the khaki-colored energy had already filled up about 1/10 of the entire space, which was already slightly larger than the azure space, and the khaki-colored energy was still continuously accumulating inside. What Chuyang didn't know was, Dukyu, who was outside, had already lost the ability to speak. It had been a full 6 hours. 6 hours. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. And that freak still seems to be continuing to comprehend. Oh my god. Is he a human or a demon? Even if he's really a demon, he wouldn't be so freakish. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.